Hello and welcome everyone to this edition of Triggered and True. Laura, we got some catching up to do. Laura just took a big trip to Europe, and I look forward to hearing all
Yeah.
about that. But just tell us one big highlight of your European trip. What was your favorite
One big
thing?
highlight, kind of based along with some of the things we talked about on the podcast, is I was just so amazed to go to these countries that, like they're having all these, buildings built in the 900s and they're having all the chaos of life happening during those times. We went through castles and learned all the things that were happening at that time. And it was so generational. It was so connected to unmet need and pain that I could just
Like
see
you
it.
could
All
see it
these
in the
stories.
architecture.
Yes, I just looked at these castles and I just knew. No, like as you're going through the castles, you're learning about the history. You're
Yeah.
learning
The
about,
families, the
the
dynamics. Yes.
families and what they did. And I mean, things got dicey there, And so like
Yeah.
you're seeing it all. And at first you're kind of in awe of it because it's a little bit different than what we experience here in the Western world in the United States. But then when it comes down to it, it's universal.
Oh, totally.
Humans get hurt and humans hurt others because of their lack and their pain. And it just made me feel like, wow, like this is the same story all over the world for centuries and centuries and centuries. Even if it comes in a different package, it's all the same.
It's interesting. I think sometimes we think the world's worse than it was. We think there was some
Yes.
golden period back, I don't know, 1,000 years ago. Christians think it was when, 2,000 years ago. But I'm like, have you read Paul's letters, all of them? I mean, the book of Acts is pretty cool, but have you read the other letters and the things he was addressing in the churches? There was a lots of messy situations.
There was a lot going
I
on.
mean, there was people sleeping with their relatives, and there was and stepchildren, all this stuff. He was
Oh,
addressing
yeah.
all kinds of things, and I'm like, there was no golden age. There was no
No,
golden age.
it's been
No.
humans ever since the garden. There have been
I
humans
guess if you had to
experiencing
say
shame.
pre-fall, post-fall, there's been no golden
Yes.
age, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's never been a golden age. And I just felt such a similarity. It felt like that could be a client sitting across from me
Yeah.
way back in the 800s, 900s. They could be sitting across from me and it would be the same story in a different time with different circumstances. Same story.
Yeah. Yeah. Interestingly, I was listening to another podcast just this morning, and they were talking about one of
You
the
listen
reasons
to other podcasts?
I
Just
listen
joking.
lots of other podcasts, but I love
know. I'm just
podcasts.
teasing.
I inhale podcasts. But this one was talking about, part of the reason why people think it's so much worse today than it was, maybe 100 years ago. And he said it had a lot to do with the news we consume. So
Mm,
human nature is to be more drawn to negative news than positive news. Okay,
yes.
that's kind of human nature. It's
What sells? Yep.
well, it's like the gaper's delay on the interstate when there's an accident. Like you just can't help but like look and all that other stuff. So humans are drawn to kind of negative news.
Yeah.
And as our news sources have switched from primarily getting local news to like really now local news, like so much of it's died out. Like local news is not
Yes,
existent.
that's true.
So if when you were more focused on local news, probabilistically, there's less likely to be bad things to talk about. But as you
Yeah.
expand and as information age, obviously we know about everything now. And as you
Yep.
expand that lens out, if you get all the way out to world
Worldview.
news,
Mhm.
worldview, like you're definitely going to be able to find something horrible going on somewhere all the time,
Oh, yeah.
all the time.
Mhm.
Whereas 100 years ago, like ignorance was bliss. You had no idea that that horrible thing was happening, a half a
Mhm.
world away.
Yep, that's true.
So there's a lot of, psychology behind that as well.
Yeah.
But back to today's podcast. Today's
Yes.
podcast is a follow up on our last podcast, which was called Uncovering Shame, Reclaiming Your True Self. And in that podcast, I'm just going to give a quick summary.
Yep.
And then we're going to dive into like me being very vulnerable. Okay. So we talked in that podcast about how shame is a virus and it's operating on a low grade level, affecting our overall well being. We also talked a fair amount about the origin of shame. We got into Genesis and to the Garden of Eden and when shame first reared its ugly head, and how a lot of times as Christians or people, we get very focused on the sin, but God was actually more focused on the Adam and Eve's perception of themselves. the fact that they realized that they were naked, and that word naked we talked about could also be translated as evil. And God's biggest concern was, who told you that you were evil? And we talked about obviously the knowledge of good and evil and all of the chaos that brought into humanity, and how the knowledge of good drives this shame cycle just as much as the knowledge of evil. And in some ways, the knowledge of good we've even talked about is more detrimental than the knowledge of evil, because we're constantly measuring ourselves up to this bar, this impossible standard. And then we talked about the key to dealing with shame, and how trying to get better can actually feed the shame system. Like this focus on we need to fix ourselves just kind of feeds that shame system. And we talked about the actual antidote for shame, of course, is compassion. And hence the compassion method that you founded all those years ago. And we also talked a lot about the behaviors we have always come from somewhere. So tracing back to early childhood experiences of shame. So those things that we do, those things that manifest in our lives have an origin, and it goes back to our early childhood development. And then we left the podcast with me saying that next time we'll go back through what I learned about shame in my life as I met with you, during my Great Awakening, which was also my nervous breakdown, but I like to call it Great Awakening. I think it just sounds more, it sounds a little bit more like, cool. I had a Great Awakening.
Yeah. Well, it's also what happened. We think nervous breakdown because of the negative experiences that we feel during that time. And that's what it's characterized as. But if you think about it, you were just not aware of things that were going on inside of you, and you were awakened to what was going on inside of you through the uncomfortable feelings of what we sometimes look at as a nervous breakdown.
Yep. Well, one thing that I remember one of the first things you told me when I sat in your office was, and this is going back just to give some people some perspective. So it'll be 7 years. 7 years next month. Is that right?
That's a long time.
That's a long time. Hey, 7 years. I should be perfectly healed. Isn't 7 like the number of completion,
Yes. It is finished.
It is finished. Yeah, right. That's back to my perfectionism. Like we can never attain perfection on this side of eternity, Yeah. So we talked about I remember you telling me like right away how shame is the root of all anxiety and depression. And we talked about that last episode as well. And for me, primarily it manifested as anxiety. But I do remember it would kind of vacillate back and forth. When I was in the throes of the Great Awakening, it'd be 80% anxiety, but then there'd be times of some pretty significant depression as well. So, you've talked about how those are really just two sides of the same coin. So you want to just kind of give a little color on that? Anxiety and depression.
Yeah. So anxiety,
how they're connected.
Yeah. So anxiety and depression are both messengers. They're trying to tell us through an anxious feeling or a depressed feeling that we have unmet need and pain. So it's ultimately your child self, that part of your brain that hasn't been reconciled, that hasn't received what it needs, whether that's comfort or the 10 gifts. And it's sending a message of a frantic, anxious feeling, getting our attention to say, hey, we don't have what we need. Same thing with depression. Depression is shutting ourselves down as an emotional trigger, shutting ourselves down and being depressed, even as a protector to try to protect ourselves, as well as anxiety, but to protect ourselves from that pain. And so we're either hyper vigilant with anxiety or we're depressed with depression to protect ourselves from the pain that we're feeling consciously or subconsciously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And then would you say that people that you meet with that are having significant issues, or they're having significant triggers, these triggers have really gotten significant. Would you say that most people kind of lean towards one versus the other more so as like a dominant way
Yeah.
that it manifests.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Like, I mean, obviously some people, equally struggle with both, but I've seen more often that one person goes more towards anxiety, one more goes more towards depression. And I think it's whatever our coding, our early childhood development, it's however we process pain during that time, they'll usually manifest it the same way.
And potentially how it was modeled by the people around us, how they process their pain. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So like, let's just say you had a depressed dad. So you modeled that when you were younger, but then let's say you became very anxious as an adult and your mom was anxious. You might fluctuate between the two based on what was modeled to you and also based on where we're at. When we feel like we have no choices, we sometimes become depressed. We feel like we have more choices, we become anxious. So sometimes it can be also circumstantial as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I do remember when I was having the really bad anxiety, I'd be like, oh man, depression would be better. And then I remember when I was feeling really, really depressed, I'd be like, I kind of like anxiety better.
Yeah. We'll just take whatever we're not experiencing now.
Yeah, right. It's kind of like, yeah. Anyway, so it's hard to believe that the root of what blew up was so simple. Mm-hmm. But it really was extraordinarily a simple explanation.
Yeah.
It took a long time to like get to that simple explanation, but to really get to that root of that explanation was very simple. And I would say it really boiled down to two things from my early childhood development. And both of them are connected to not feeling like a man, by not feeling like I was a man. And that's where my shame was connected to. So the two things really is that when I was younger, I would say definitely more so than my parents, much more sensitive, where I would feel things deeply and I would express that. And maybe I'd cry a lot. I'd cry easily, or I would perceive that I would cry easily, especially compared to what was modeled or maybe accepted. And I know that, my parents provided me a lot of wonderful things, but that was definitely an area where that was not something that they were able to connect with. And it was something that definitely, I would say, kind of annoyed them. Real or perceived. I don't know if it really annoyed them or if I perceived it annoyed them, but that's how it felt to me. Yeah, right.
Which, as a child, your perspective is your reality.
Yeah, right.
So that was real to you, whether that was real from them or not, it was real to you.
Yep. So I had a lot of shame connected to that. So, we talk about how shame is, what you do is, it's a belief that what you do is who you are. So in this case, if I cried easily, I was a crybaby. Okay. So, and that's not really,
you did.
Right. That's something I did. That's not really something positive, So, or at least I didn't perceive it as positive. Now I would look at it as being a wonderful thing to be able to feel emotions deeply. Is a wonderful gift to have. You know? So the second thing is that I was just so little. I just totally, growing up was so tiny. Just to give a perspective of that, my freshman year of high school, I was like 4'10" and weighed like 90 some pounds. Like there was not a single person in the entire high school that I was taller than. So, wow. And that was a huge source of shame for me, man. And it just really, again, really made me feel like I was something less than. And we were talking before this episode, we were talking a little bit about, part of my shame came from something I did, which I was in my mind overly sensitive crybaby. The second part was, that I was just little. Okay. So that's not something I actually did, but I still had a lot of shame connected to it. And you were talking to me about shame is like what you do, or it's connected to those innate characteristics of who we are. Someone else might have the same kind of shame because they're overweight or they're perceived to be overweight or people think they're overweight. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I've even heard tall people talk about things like that.
Can't change your height. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and people are always pointing out constantly how tall they are. Well, people would always point out constantly how small I was. I remember one time we had these neighbor kids, and they had 3 boys, and I would babysit them. And I want to say that the oldest boy was like 5 years younger than me. Well, towards the tail end of my time babysitting them, he was as tall as me. So I remember one time, someone saying that I was babysitting them, like, who's babysitting who, and I'm just like, stuff like that people would say all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I people say that about tall people too, whatever, but they don't realize, no, I think if anybody would have realized how I was internalizing all that, they wouldn't have done it, obviously. But the hard thing was, so I would say those 2 things were the root of my shame. And, we talked a lot about this when we met one-on-one, is that it wasn't so much that I was little. It wasn't so much that I was sensitive. It's just that my parents just did not have a grid for it. They were not able to be there with me in that. And come from a long line of, I would say, people that try to be very stoic. And not getting emotionally engaged, so on and so forth. So really the gift, when we talk about the 10 gifts, the gift that really was getting kind of blown up here, that I had like a massive crater in my heart, was in this concept of not feeling like I was enough.
Yeah.
Like just this constant feeling like I wasn't a man. I wasn't man enough. I wasn't enough because of my stature, because of this sensitivity. So it's like that is, and to just walk that all the way forward and to see how that has, manifested throughout my life and all the different places where I tried to compensate. We talk about them as being protectors. And protectors are those things that we're trying to do to not feel, or we have feelings and we don't know what to do with them. So we got to displace this somewhere else. And a lot of times our protectors do that. So I would say that my protectors, my compensation things drove so much behavior.
Yeah.
And one of the big areas that drove it was in the area of work. So it was so important to me that I be seen as a hard worker, because that could help compensate, because that's what men did.
Yeah.
That's what my dad did.
You're like, I can't change my height, but I can change what I do by working harder to be more of a man.
Yeah. So I'm on that knowledge of good and evil hamster wheel. So to be good means to work hard. Okay.
So even though shame doesn't always come from what you do, we usually try to reconcile,
fix it with what we do
through what we do. Exactly.
100%. And, my dad definitely modeled hard work, which is a wonderful thing. And I'm so thankful for that, because my life has reaped a lot of blessings because I know how to work really hard. Okay. But, it's not a place to be getting your significance from. And that's what I was doing,
or your identity. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also, we've talked about even more recently, I think there's been a lot of growth in my area in the enough, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But there was another aspect of that work thing, and it's connected to play, because play felt shameful because you should be working.
Yeah.
So that was not, there were certain types of play that, I felt like my family was cool with, like being in sports or, doing things like that. But just being goofy, play for play's sake, being silly, absolutely not, and then if you did too much play, you should be working. So I feel like I really had to grow up kind of fast, because I got thrown into the world of work at a very, very young age, growing up on a farm, which was so cool, in so many ways. But
didn't you say you were 5 when you started to do
Well,
chores
I
and
don't
be
know.
working?
Well,
Okay. But it was young.
well, you were out there doing it with them as soon as you can remember anything. Like, that was like,
Yeah.
there wasn't a babysitter or daycare. You just rode around the tractor. So it's like, so like,
Yeah.
here's a little pitchfork. It's just got three little things on it, and it's half size. You can use that. But so, but those are, a lot of it'd be like anybody that has a family business where you actually have work that the kids could do to help. And that could be a
Yeah.
restaurant. That could be, a lot of
Yeah.
things.
Which like you said, is beneficial to learn
Hugely.
and to,
Oh man,
everything you've gained from it. Yeah.
yeah, I've gained the entrepreneurial stuff. There's a lot of good from it, and I don't want to take away from that. But when you look at where the deficiencies are and kind of what led to the Great Awakening, definitely this lack of being able to have the freedom to play, because you've defined play as the freedom to not to have to do anything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just like, if there's nothing to do,
yeah.
I'm like, no, there should be something to do. So if there's any dead time, even for me to this day, I'm like, what do I fill this with? Like, I'm going through like, what could I be doing? What could I be working on? What could I be doing? So there was a lot of guilt connected to play, and I think that is something I'm becoming more aware of just in the last couple of years, just how stunted I am in that area. So, and then thinking through all those other compensation things like the need to be cool and just the peer pressure and like all the things that go along with that through your adolescence and all the stupid.
Oh yeah, it's huge.
Stupid.
It feels like
things.
It now in hindsight, but in the moment, it's your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was that need to be cool. Another big protector was, work, but work is very closely connected to, if you're going to work, it's connected to performance. So performance was the other one. So these are all the things I'm doing to compensate for feeling overly sensitive, feeling like a crybaby, not a man that way, and for just being little and being a runt.
One good like illustration when we talk about shame is in the garden when Adam and Eve covered themselves. This is what you were covering yourself with.
Yeah,
you were covering yourself with working hard. You were covering yourself with performance. You were covering yourself with all those things that you talked about to cover up who you were, because you believe because you were shorter that you were less of a man. So you had to compensate by covering yourself with other things. That you couldn't be naked and unashamed. You couldn't be just yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's good stuff. And then we've talked about this before, but like when I was in my mid-20s, I had more of a spiritual awakening. And one wonderful thing my parents did is, they drug me to church every Sunday. And a lot of Sundays it was half dragging because it was not what I wanted to be doing. And I would say that that's one of the things I'm probably most thankful about them doing is being very adamant about that. Because as boring as I thought it was at the time, there was definitely foundational things being put there that God used in powerful ways later on in my life. So then after living like a heathen for quite a while and doing these cool things and all this other stuff, my mid-20s, when my frontal lobe probably got a little more fully developed and was recognizing that that's a stupid way to live life, I had more of a spiritual awakening and quit drinking and, quit doing a lot of those things. But unfortunately, when we've talked about this, I didn't really find the freedom in Christ. I just kind of replaced our version of protectors for a PG version of protectors. And kind of the things I was doing to cover myself, so to speak, like you mentioned, just they got cleaned up a little bit, so it wasn't drinking and partying and some of the things that went along with that. It was more things that were work. Work kind of remained always.
Yeah.
Work was always like there,
Working, and also Christianity can become work.
Totally. It did for me. Yeah. I mean, it was my faith became very much a work that I was using to help cover myself. So, and then, I mean, it's amazing some of the crazy things you can accomplish from your shame, being driven by your shame.
Yeah.
But,
oh, yeah. It's pretty amazing.
you
But
know,
what does it cost you?
but it costs something. And I think about I was thinking of like professional things and like work wise, like one of my greatest achievements that I ever did professionally was establishing this really complicated business and this whole, it was a complicated business to structure. And the whole thing was driven by the whole premise of doing this business and establishing this is that there was this guy in the industry that said it couldn't be done.
Hmm.
And that guy was kind of someone that got under my skin pretty easy.
Yeah.
He was a little bit brash, a little bit arrogant, and he kind of reminded me of the bullies.
Exactly. I was like,
100%.
what did that remind you of?
He
Exactly.
did.
You were ready to prove as an adult what you couldn't prove when you were a kid through that business.
And that guy said it couldn't be done. And I'm just like, He said there was these regulatory issues and this and that. I'm like, yeah, yeah, but I think all that can get worked through. There's precedents here. There's this, that. And I went to work on it. 4 years later, it was done. Like
Wow.
the business was there, but
but
but it was never able to be profitable. Like, but I did it. Like in my mind, like this guy, I proved him wrong. And
you
like
said it couldn't be done and it was done. Was it profitable? No, but you did it.
It was not profitable. And there was some red flags along the way that maybe it wasn't going to be profitable. But I was just like, well, if I can just get it approved, then I know that so I just think about the amazing things that you can do. And we talked a little bit about this, like when I read Elon Musk's biography, the one that's really good from Walter Isaacson. And I see the amazing things that he's been able to accomplish.
Yeah.
Out of his pain.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no freedom.
People do.
Yeah. There's
but
no
it's
freedom.
Kind of like what the Bible talks about though, is, you gain the whole world, you gain whatever you're trying to succeed in too, that we actually feel like will medicate our pain.
Right.
We gain the whole thing, but we lose our soul.
Yeah.
And that's the cost. The cost is you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what I tell people is that if you're lucky in this lifetime, you'll come to the end of that.
Yeah.
Like it'll boil over. You'll have your own great awakening where the crap will hit the fan and like, you're like, okay, I can't even function anymore. I got to deal with this. Now it's hard because like going through that, like that was hard. And that was very, 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 very painful. But, but at the same time, like, I almost feel like the more determined you are, the more determined you are, the more focused you are, the harder you work, like the bigger you crash. You know what I'm saying? So like,
totally.
So I'm so thankful that it happened for so many reasons. But one of the things I really wanted to hit on, and I think this hits a lot of Christians when they come to the compassion method and they're like, I just want God to heal me or to take this anxiety away or to take that away. And I'm like, I get that. But the thing is that you think you want it done one way, which is you want to snap your finger and you want it to be gone. And God sometimes does that. So there was a time in my life where I had, not to the level of the Great Awakening, but I had a tremendous amount of anxiety over something. And it was just in my mid-20s when I was coming back to my faith. And I will never forget praying through a Bible verse in my shower. And that thing that had me just in knots, like just lifted off of me. Like it was so 100% supernatural. Like it just was gone. And I kept thinking like, okay, I'm going to get out of the shower and it's going to come back. It didn't. Like when I say it was gone, it was gone. And then the thing that was kind of, the thing that I thought was causing the anxiety kind of fixed itself out in like 3 or 4 days after that. Like it was
Wow.
gone anyway. And it didn't even matter because I already was free.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does happen
Of
supernaturally.
course. Yeah.
But
and it's not that we don't want God to come and do things, but at the same time, it's about relationship.
But the root was still there.
Exactly.
The root was still there.
Yep, exactly. That's why I always tell people, like, God wants to not just do, I mean, he does miracles, but he doesn't want to just do a miracle. He wants to be with us through it.
He wants a relationship, and he doesn't want to be a genie in a bottle.
No, exactly.
So did I ever tell you about my Psalm 22 dream?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember that. That was amazing. You should share
I'm gonna right now. Yeah.
No, I remember that. That was amazing.
So, so this is something I wrote in my journal back on my birthday, July 27th, 2013. Okay. So this was what I journaled. I said, and the Lord I said, today's July 27th, 2013, my 38th birthday, and the Lord gave me an amazing gift. So this is what I wrote all those years ago. I said, before I share the gift, a little background is in order. For the past several months, God has taken me on a journey of self-discovery. He has sent wonderful people into my life to help me understand why I struggle in certain areas. With the assistance of the Holy Spirit and the people he sent, I've determined that the stronghold in my life that I need deliverance from is shame. So I wrote this more than 5 years before, the Great Awakening.
Wow.
So yeah, I was already on to it.
Actually, I don't remember that dream. I thought you were talking about a different one. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I don't remember that.
No, this might be a different one, but yeah. So anyway, so I recognized that I had this stronghold of shame, and then I went on to describe where the shame came from, my childhood.
Wow.
Feeling little. I forgot that I knew this already.
That's so great.
But this is 5 years before I was in your office, practically 6. So yeah. So anyway, so here's what happened on that day, on July 27th, 2013. So I woke up kind of early, went back to bed, and I fell into a dream. And in the dream, I was in a classroom, and the professor or the teacher was teaching about Psalm 22. Okay.
Wow.
That's it. That's all I remember from the dream. The subject was Psalm 22. I don't remember anything else about what happened, but all I remember was waking up and thinking, oh my gosh, I can't wait to go read Psalm 22. Because I'm like, God's got something in there for me, like this dream. And it just was like, so I just, boom, I went right to it. So here's then what happened. So I went to read Psalm 22. And then I said, when I got to verse 6, I stopped in my tracks. So I'll just read it. The psalm goes, oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our fathers trusted. They trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried and were rescued. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. And here's the verse that just smoked me. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads.
Wow.
Okay, so I knew that David had written this psalm. Okay, so I was like connecting with it. I was connecting like, oh yeah, David felt this way. Yeah. Well, then I went a little deeper with it and just read what it said. I was kind of really big in that season reading the Matthew Henry commentary. And this is what it said in the Matthew Henry commentary. He said, the Spirit of Christ, which was in the prophets, testifies in this psalm as clearly and fully as anywhere in the whole Old Testament to the sufferings of Christ and the glory that should follow. There is no doubt that David is speaking about Jesus Christ here. It's the sensitive part. There is no doubt that David is speaking about Jesus, not of himself or any other person. Much of this psalm is explicitly applied to Christ in the New Testament. All of it may be applied to him. And some of it must be understood as referring only to him. And what got me was like, God knows what it feels like, literally, to not feel like a man.
Wow. Oh.
You know, when Jesus was going through what he was going through, I mean, he was humiliated to the point of not even feeling like a human.
Wow.
And I know what that feels like.
Yeah.
So, like in that moment, you know, it was so
Compassion.
profound. Yeah.
That's empathy. That's compassion at its deepest levels.
Yeah. Yeah. So now here's where I want to go with this. One would think after an encounter like that, you'd be pretty well set free, right?
Yeah.
You would think.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't.
Yeah.
5 years later, there I was, you know, where it reached its zenith. And
Yeah.
it really reminds me of like what you talk about, like when you first were establishing the compassion method, when God said, you know, don't bring me in until I've been properly introduced.
Yeah.
And as amazing as that spiritual encounter was, and I can still feel the actual compassion from it.
Oh,
I can
no,
still
that's
feel
extraordinary. Yeah. There's no doubt.
I still needed it to come from a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
It still had to come. I had to tangibly feel it coming to me from a person.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, in the 10 gifts process, you know, identifying a caregiver, you know, someone that was able to give me that gift of feeling like I was enough.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's really catapulted my healing. You know, all of these other things were like steps along the way.
Of course.
What's really drove the healing deeper was, and I don't want people to miss this, because people in their pain want to bypass people. People in their pain want to bypass people.
Yep.
Like exactly. They don't want to have to deal with, they don't have to deal with people because humans hurt us.
Exactly.
They just want to go straight to God
because they hurt us. Exactly.
But God's like, let's back up a second. The situation, the way that I actually put this together is that you were meant to feel these gifts, these emotional needs were meant to come through your mom and dad. People, like I wanted it to be skin on skin, and my skin's not there anymore. My skin's gone. Jesus isn't walking the earth as a human being anymore. So he wants us to experience those gifts coming from him through people, him with skin on. You know, we are his hands and feet.
And just like Jesus experienced as a human, he experienced humans. He had a mommy and a daddy, 0 to 12 years old too, because he was a human that needed humans.
Right. Right. So in our spirituality, we can't do an end around the system that God put in place to deliver this to us. As much as we'd like to just skip humans because they suck a lot of the times.
Yeah, exactly. Why would we go there?
Humans suck a lot of times.
And they do. But humans also carry love and compassion in a unique way.
Yeah.
That is as important as spirituality on this earth.
And in my mind, they don't separate it. That is spirituality.
Yeah. No, exactly.
It's the system God put in place. Like he
but
did
I mean
it.
more like spirituality without human contact. I 100% agree. They are meant to go together.
Yeah.
Because it's
everything's spiritual. There is no
within humans. Exactly. There's no separation. But sometimes because of our pain, we separate from our humanity.
Totally. And
we only feel comfortable in our spirituality, but they're meant to go together.
Yeah, because we get into blame, which is the other way we deflect, and we've talked a lot about that. But
that woman you gave me, she made me eat it.
yeah, right. Yeah. So no, and I think it really just underscores, and the point I really just want to drive home is that, am I perfectly set free from shame? No, but it's a level of degrees. So when I think about where I was in 2013, exactly. I got a measure of something that day. I remember being in my workout room that morning, because that's where I kind of had this whole epiphany and was reading the Bible and all that. And I started crying, and my daughter came in because she heard me. I must have been crying loud enough that she heard me or something, or she just happened to walk in, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong?" And I'm like, "No, don't worry." You know what it was? I think the dog started barking like crazy. Because whenever I'd start to do that, or whenever someone would have a big emotion, the dog would start to bark. Well, anyway, that drew them, and they saw I was crying and whatever. So, and then they were like, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I'm like, "No, it's a good wrong. It's a good wrong.
Wrong.
It's a good wrong. It's a good thing." Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, so as profound as that was, there was more. The healing had to go further because I had to experience that. So my first gift giver was hitting on this area of enough, and it was the coach. Yeah. The coach that I had, that, the coach that was very rough around the edges, but gave me that gift. Yeah. And that's where
healed your shame of not feeling like you're enough.
Yeah. Yeah. That's brought a lot of healing to my shame. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, that's really my journey, and it's still remarkable to me how complicated it felt when I was sitting in your office. Like, I felt that I was facing the most complicated thing on the planet. Like, Einstein couldn't solve what I had going on. Yeah, like there was no.
Yeah, I often say our trigger makes it complicated, but when we reconnect with our true selves, it's simpler than we think.
Yeah, and I prided myself. I could usually just always work things out. Like that company. Every hitch I found an end around. There were so many dead ends, and I figured out the end around, and I figured it out, and I figured it out, and I figured it out. But I couldn't figure this out. I couldn't figure out why had to come to your office.
Well, and that's
if anybody could have figured it out, I think I could have figured it out, because I could have just worked my way through it. Read enough books, did enough stuff.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. But that's the tricky thing about shame, is you can't work your way out of it, because the more you work, the worse it gets. Yeah. Because the more you try to do to get out, it keeps you stuck. The only way you can get through shame is to heal shame by receiving what you needed, by getting the comfort that you needed, getting the compassion that you needed. It heals the shame that work could never heal.
Yeah. Yeah. Work, just keep digging yourself a deeper hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's definitely a journey, and I look forward to, really, the next one that really still lies before me is play. Because we've talked about this a lot of times. I still have not found the level of healing there that I know that I will eventually. Yeah.
You had moments that it's been easier, but not the same level of that healing that came from receiving the gift of not enough. So the gift of play. I love that. And also I would say that many times the gift of not needing to receive the gift of enough does help you with the gift of play.
Yeah.
Because it allows you to relax, where when you're not enough, you're frantically working for it.
Yeah.
And when you receive it.
the funny story when you talk about like helping you get it, I mean, for me, when I drank, that's where I was able to play, and that's what made me laugh when I thought about it. That reminded me of my wife in marriage counseling saying she was the victim of false advertisement, because when we were dating and courting, I was drinking. So, and I was
this
fun.
Guy's so fun.
And I was fun. I mean, there's some videos out there. I was fun. I had a good time.
But that's still within you. Drinking just help you be less inhibited, but that's still the real you.
Yeah, I know
The
you
safer you
I know you
feel.
keep saying that. It just, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But it is it's a game of increments, and
Yeah, of course.
we're
Yeah.
working our way that direction.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, very good. So yeah, I guess my encouragement to everyone listening, one of my big encouragements is that what we're doing with the compassion method is profoundly spiritual, even if it doesn't feel spiritual in the sense that you were taught spirituality or your experience of, you know, how you studied Christianity or whatever. But this process is profoundly spiritual, and it can
Yeah.
take everything you've learned throughout your experience of being a Christian or whatever, and you can just take it to the absolute next level. It actually help you
Yeah.
live. It help you live in everything you're reading. It'll help you actually appropriate it to your life.
Exactly.
It'll actually help you
Exactly.
appropriate it to your life. So yeah. So yeah. So any closing thoughts that you have, Laura?
No, I loved hearing your story and thank you for being vulnerable in it. And I love just the fact of how you can bridge those two worlds of your spiritual experience and your emotional experience together and how they really go together seamlessly and what it's done for your heart and for yourself. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Literally, because obviously you had a big hand in that. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode. If anybody has any questions or anything, definitely. We've been getting quite a few questions lately, so
Yeah.
I think we need
Yeah.
to do a episode on questions
I think
because
so. And Brian's your answers, I just got back, so I just got a chance to catch up on some of your answers are amazing. We should
yeah,
post that on our podcast page.
yeah, we can go through them. But there's been some really good questions, so I almost think that
Yeah,
maybe
there
an
has.
episode going after
Yeah,
some of
ask
those.
questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of them are
Even if you're
really
thinking like,
connected. A lot of
yeah.
them have been really connected to faith. People trying to
Hmm.
bring their faith, their Christian faith, and how does that connect with
Yeah.
the compassion method and so on
Yeah.
and so
Bring
forth.
any questions, even if you feel like it's controversial or not agreeing or you don't understand something, bring questions. That's how we learn.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye bye.
See you, everyone.